Legal and administrative preparation for Aliyah represents the delightful challenge of convincing two entirely different governmental systems that you are, in fact, the same law-abiding citizen who has somehow managed to exist legally in one country and would like to continue existing legally in another, without accidentally becoming an international fugitive or stateless person wandering between bureaucratic jurisdictions. This process transforms ordinary individuals into amateur legal scholars, professional form completion specialists, and part-time diplomatic negotiators who develop expertise in governmental communication methods that would qualify them for United Nations bureaucracy positions. UK administrative closure, breaking up with Britain officially. Informing Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs of your departure requires more documentation than most divorce proceedings, as if leaving the UK represents a betrayal of national loyalty, requiring extensive justification and evidence that you're genuinely relocating rather than attempting elaborate tax avoidance schemes involving fake international addresses. HMRC treats departure notifications with suspicion typically reserved for international money laundering investigations, requiring proof that you actually intend to live elsewhere rather than maintaining secret UK residency while claiming foreign tax benefits. Tax departure procedures involve completing forms that assume everyone leaving the UK is either fleeing criminal prosecution or attempting sophisticated financial fraud schemes. You'll need to document your intended foreign address, employment plans, family relocation details, and possibly character references from people who can verify that you're genuinely emigrating rather than participating in elaborate tax evasion conspiracies involving multiple international jurisdictions. Cancelling voter registration feels surprisingly emotional, like officially divorcing your homeland over irreconcilable differences about weather patterns and queuing etiquette systems. Electoral registration offices will treat your departure announcement like suspicious voter fraud prevention measures, requiring evidence that you're actually leaving rather than attempting to vote in multiple countries simultaneously through sophisticated electoral manipulation schemes. DVLA notification requires surrendering your British driving license, a process that suggests surrendering your license automatically transforms you into someone incapable of operating motor vehicles safely in any other country. The bureaucracy treats license surrender like relinquishing dangerous weapons rather than routine administrative procedures for people relocating internationally, requiring forms that ask whether you're surrendering due to medical incapacity, criminal conviction, or international relocation, as if these categories are somehow equivalent administrative concerns. NHS registration cancellation involves explaining to healthcare administrators that other countries do, in fact, have functioning medical systems capable of providing healthcare services without NHS oversight. Medical registration departments treat international relocation like abandoning civilization for primitive wilderness areas where modern healthcare doesn't exist, requiring reassurance that you understand the risks of accessing foreign medical care without proper British medical supervision. Israeli administrative preparation, embracing bureaucratic chaos. Understanding Israeli bureaucratic systems requires accepting that organizational efficiency is a Western imperialist concept that doesn't apply to Middle Eastern administrative procedures, where queuing systems operate according to social dynamics rather than chronological arrival principles, and customer service representatives treat administrative inquiries like personal favors rather than professional obligations. Israeli government departments operate on scheduling systems that suggest appointments are more like rough suggestions than actual commitments, where showing up on time demonstrates naive unfamiliarity with Israeli scheduling culture that operates according to flexible time concepts. Government office hours appear to be determined using methods that prioritize employee convenience over public service accessibility, with lunch breaks extending according to weather conditions and social conversation requirements. National insurance registration requires understanding Bituach Leumi procedures that make British national insurance seem like a simple stamp collection hobby rather than complex social security administration. Israeli social security operates according to contribution categories, benefit structures, and eligibility requirements that require advanced mathematics skills and supernatural bureaucratic interpretation abilities to navigate successfully. Tax registration with Israeli tax authorities involves understanding tax code systems more complex than advanced calculus, where different types of income are taxed according to different rates, schedules, and reporting requirements that change based on residency status, immigration timing, and possibly lunar calendar considerations. Israeli tax forms require completion skills that would challenge professional accountants with advanced degrees in international taxation law. Israeli driving license requirements assume that British driving experience doesn't automatically qualify you for Israeli road navigation, which becomes understandable after experiencing Israeli traffic patterns that operate according to negotiation principles rather than traffic law enforcement. Driving tests may be required despite decades of British driving experience, apparently because Israeli roads present unique challenges that require specialized local knowledge beyond general automotive operation skills. Legal documentation, international legal translation adventures. Updating wills to comply with Israeli law requires understanding inheritance legal systems that operate according to different principles than British estate law, where inheritance procedures, tax implications, and legal requirements follow completely different frameworks that affect everything from property ownership to family financial planning. Israeli inheritance law apparently operates according to religious law influences that make British secular estate planning seem simple and straightforward by comparison. Power of attorney arrangements for continuing UK affairs require legal documents that satisfy both British and Israeli legal requirements, creating international legal coordination challenges that require understanding legal systems that may conflict in their basic assumptions about legal authority, representation procedures, and cross-border legal validity. International power of attorney arrangements involve legal complexity that would challenge professional international law attorneys with specialized training in multi-jurisdictional legal coordination. Legal document apostille requirements ensure that your legal documents are properly certified for international recognition, a process that involves more official stamps and certifications than diplomatic treaties, apparently because legal document authenticity requires verification by multiple levels of governmental authority to prevent international legal document fraud schemes. Marriage and divorce certificate recognition involves proving that your British marital status translates accurately to Israeli legal marital status categories, which apparently operate according to different classification systems, where British legal marriage categories don't automatically correspond to Israeli marital status options. Some British marital statuses may not exist in Israeli legal frameworks, requiring creative legal interpretation to determine equivalent Israeli legal classification categories. Professional licensing, career qualification translation. Professional licensing in Israel requires proving that your British professional qualifications translate to Israeli professional competency standards, a process that assumes British professional training may not adequately prepare you for Israeli professional practice requirements. Professional licensing boards operate review procedures more thorough than doctoral dissertation committees, apparently believing that professional competence requires extensive local knowledge beyond general professional training and experience. Professional association membership involves understanding Israeli professional organization structures that operate according to different principles than British professional associations, where membership requirements, continuing education obligations, and professional conduct standards follow different frameworks that affect everything from professional liability to career advancement opportunities. Continuing education requirements for maintaining Israeli professional licenses often exceed British professional development obligations, suggesting that Israeli professional practice requires ongoing learning commitments that challenge most professionals' time management capabilities while maintaining full-time employment and family responsibilities during immigration adjustment periods. Professional liability insurance requirements operate according to different coverage standards and legal frameworks than British professional insurance, where liability exposure, coverage requirements, and insurance availability follow different risk assessment principles that affect professional practice costs and legal protection levels. Insurance and legal protection requirements. Israeli mandatory insurance requirements extend beyond basic healthcare coverage to include various insurance obligations that may not exist in British legal frameworks. where insurance coverage for activities, property, and legal liability follows different mandatory coverage standards that affect everything from housing rental to professional practice operations. Home insurance requirements for rental properties involve understanding Israeli insurance law that operates according to different principles than British property insurance, where coverage obligations, liability distributions, and insurance claim procedures follow different frameworks that affect both landlord and tenant legal and financial responsibilities. Professional liability and errors and omissions insurance requirements often exceed British professional insurance standards, suggesting that Israeli professional practice involves higher liability exposure or different legal frameworks for professional responsibility and client protection that require enhanced insurance coverage for adequate legal and financial protection. Motor vehicle insurance operates according to mandatory coverage requirements that exceed British motor insurance obligations, where Israeli motor insurance includes coverage categories that may not exist in British insurance frameworks, apparently because Israeli driving conditions present unique risks requiring specialized insurance protection beyond standard automotive liability coverage. Bureaucratic navigation and cultural adaptation. Israeli bureaucratic culture operates on communication principles that make British bureaucratic politeness seem like passive-aggressive behavior, where administrative interactions require assertiveness levels that challenge British cultural training in polite queue management and respectful authority interactions. Israeli bureaucracy expects customers to advocate actively for their needs rather than waiting patiently for bureaucratic attention and assistance. Government office procedures operate according to relationship-building principles, where personal connections affect service quality and processing efficiency more than formal procedures or documented eligibility criteria. Israeli bureaucratic success often depends on developing personal relationships with government employees who can provide guidance and assistance beyond standard procedural requirements. Administrative appeal procedures for bureaucratic decisions involve understanding Israeli legal frameworks for challenging government decisions, where appeal processes, legal representation requirements, and procedural timelines operate according to different principles than British administrative law frameworks. Israeli administrative appeals may require legal representation for procedures that would be handled through simple administrative review processes in British governmental systems. Language barriers in legal and administrative procedures create communication challenges that affect everything from document completion to legal representation quality, where Hebrew language requirements for legal procedures may exceed conversational Hebrew proficiency levels achieved through standard immigration preparation language study programs. Civic obligations and participation. Israeli voter registration involves understanding political system structures that operate according to different principles than British parliamentary democracy, where political party systems, electoral procedures, and civic participation opportunities follow different frameworks that require learning about Israeli political culture and electoral participation methods. Military service obligations or exemptions require understanding Israeli military service law that may affect family members differently based on age, gender, and immigration status, where military service requirements, alternative service options, and exemption procedures follow complex eligibility criteria that require careful legal evaluation for immigration planning purposes. Jury duty and civic participation obligations involve understanding Israeli legal system participation requirements that operate according to different principles than British civic duty frameworks, where citizen legal system participation, jury selection procedures, and civic obligation compliance follow different requirements that affect long-term legal residency obligations. Community participation expectations in Israeli society operate according to social integration principles that may exceed British community involvement expectations, where successful social integration requires active participation in community organizations, religious institutions, or social groups that contribute to overall community social fabric maintenance and development. Legal system differences and adaptation. Israeli legal system structures operate according to different principles than British common law frameworks, where legal precedent, court procedures, and legal representation requirements follow different legal tradition frameworks that affect everything from contract law interpretation to criminal legal procedure protections. Contract law differences affect everything from employment agreements to property rental contracts, where Israeli contract law interpretation, enforcement procedures, and legal remedy options follow different legal frameworks that require understanding Israeli legal system approaches to contractual obligation interpretation and enforcement mechanisms. Property law differences affect real estate transactions, property ownership rights, and property use regulations that operate according to different legal principles than British property law, where property ownership, transfer procedures, and use restriction frameworks follow different legal tradition approaches that affect long-term property investment and ownership strategies. Consumer protection legal frameworks operate according to different consumer rights principles and enforcement mechanisms than British consumer protection law, where consumer legal remedy options, business regulation standards, and consumer advocacy resources follow different legal frameworks that affect daily commercial transaction legal protection and remedy availability. The ultimate legal and administrative reality reveals that successful immigration requires developing expertise in dual legal system navigation that exceeds most professional legal training programs, while maintaining compliance with legal obligations across multiple jurisdictions that operate according to completely different legal tradition frameworks and bureaucratic culture expectations. This magnificent legal adventure ensures that by completion, you'll have acquired international legal administration expertise that qualifies you for consulting with other bewildered immigrants attempting similar multi-jurisdictional legal system transitions, or possibly for employment with international law firms specializing in immigration legal complexity management and cross-border bureaucratic navigation services. Emergency legal preparedness and contingency planning. Legal emergency preparedness requires understanding both British and Israeli legal emergency procedures for situations involving accidents, medical emergencies, or legal disputes that might occur during transition periods when legal jurisdiction questions could complicate emergency response and legal representation access. Emergency legal contact information should include both British and Israeli legal representation options for situations that might require immediate legal assistance during immigration transition periods. Legal document emergency access requires maintaining copies of essential legal documents in multiple accessible locations across both countries, ensuring that emergency situations don't prevent access to critical legal documentation needed for medical decisions, legal representation, or administrative procedure completion during crisis situations that might occur during immigration transition periods. This comprehensive legal and administrative preparation framework transforms immigration legal requirements from overwhelming bureaucratic chaos into manageable sequential procedures, with clear priorities, realistic expectations, and adequate contingency planning for the inevitable complications that arise when attempting to satisfy legal requirements across multiple governmental systems that operate according to completely different legal tradition frameworks and bureaucratic culture expectations.